when I was growing up in Missouri, I didn't really see any Mosrites. I mean, I'm sure that they must have been out there, but they were not common at all. And then I got into the Collins kids and Joe Maphis, and they were playing those fabulous 1950s Mosrite double necks, with all the decoration on them and everything. And I was just fascinated by those guitars. I was like, what are those? And, at some point it clicked like, oh, that's the same Mosrite company that made the Ventures guitars.
Yeah.
And then I became a Ramones fan, and it was like, oh,
Yeah.
Johnny Ramone plays this Mosrite guitar. And when I moved out to California, I remember the first time that the Dave and D combo played up in Bakersfield, we went to this pawn shop and there was a Mosrite double neck for sale there for $300.
Whoa.
And even then that was a cheap price. It was kind of like a spare parts double neck. It was kind of funky. It was not all straight, but it was a playable guitar.
Yeah.
And Dave Stuckey had to loan me the $300, which I paid him back, $50 a time. And that was how I started playing the Mosrite double neck with the Dave and D combo, which then got us the gig to back up the Collins kids. And, then I wound up backing up Noki Edwards of the Ventures. As time went on, I just had kind of a fascination with the brand. And for those of people out there who don't know anything about Mosrite guitars, it's an interesting story because it's not like Fender or Gibson where they had a giant factory. It was basically the story of this guy, Simi Mosley, and his brother, Andy Mosley. And they grew up around Bakersfield, and they were Pentecostal gospel musicians. They played music in the church.
Yeah.
They were like, hardcore Pentecostal. If you know anything about that Pentecostal music, it sounds like rock and roll, except that they're singing about Jesus.
Yeah.
It's really like kind of, wild up-tempo music. The Pentecostals are the ones that speak in tongues, and, some of the Pentecostals in the Deep South, like, do the snake handling and all that.
Cool.
So as far as church music goes, like, it was rock and roll. And Simi invented this guitar in the mid 1950s. It was a triple neck guitar that he played, and it was a crazy looking thing. And he would go around and play these gospel revival meetings, Simi Mosley and his triple neck guitar. And then he wound up meeting Joe Maphis, building this double neck for him, meeting Larry Collins, building this double neck for him.
Oh.
He began building guitars for other people on the Town Hall Party TV show, or modifying their guitars to have, custom pick guards and their name in the neck and things like that. And he was living in LA during the 50s when he was doing all that. And then he moved back up to Bakersfield in 1959 and kind of gave up for a while. And he was sort of a nomad. He would go preach, and he would play gospel music, and he would make a couple guitars here and there.
Yeah.
But he was just making guitars out of his garage and a tin shed that they rented from a fiddle player up there named Jelly Sanders. And that was when Noki Edwards happened to play one of these guitars while he was up there. And he said, hey, the Ventures have been looking to have a signature model guitar, and I like this guitar. Like, we should go into partnership together. And so virtually overnight, the Ventures invested something like $100,000, and he built a factory in Bakersfield, had a bunch of employees. All of a sudden, instead of making guitars one or two at a time, he's literally like gearing up to make them like,
What?
hundreds of guitars a month.
Can you back up a little bit? Because
Sure.
So like the Ventures, they're out of like Seattle, right?
But they were living in Los Angeles at the time.
Okay, so was this like 1962 or 63? And like, was it like Walk Don't Run came out? They made a bunch of money and they said, let's go with Mosrite.
Well, they, a couple of things happened with the Ventures band. First of all, they moved from Tacoma, Washington down to Los Angeles. The second thing that happened, they were playing Fender guitars, and Bob Bogle was the lead guitar player and Noki Edwards was the bass player.
Oh.
But Noki was such a good guitar player that by around 1962, they decided, Noki should be the lead guitar player and Bob should be the bass player. And they did that, and almost immediately their sound changed. They sort of became more aggressive sounding. And they also changed the drummer. They got this fabulous drummer named Mel Taylor, who was just a really hard-hitting, fast, crisp drummer. So it really became a new band around that time. And they were making a bunch of money. And so they were looking to endorse a guitar, you know. And this Mosrite thing just kind of dropped in their lap at the perfect time. And so they invested a bunch of money with them, and Semi went into mass production, and they made thousands and thousands of these Mosrite Ventures models before going into bankruptcy in 1969.
Oh.
And the Ventures deal fell apart in 68, and it just all kind of, it just kind of ended after that. And then he went back to living this sort of nomadic lifestyle. I'm not going to go through the whole book here, but I'm going to touch on some of the high points. He, because I find it to be a fascinating story. He made this red, white, and blue acoustic guitar for Buck Owens. And the first couple of episodes of Hee Haw, Buck Owens is playing a Mosrite red, white, and blue acoustic guitar.
Whoa.
And so this was going to be what saved Mosrite and got him back in business again. Unfortunately, Buck Owens kind of screwed him on that deal and went with Harmony to build these very inexpensive red, white, and blue all-American guitars.
Oh.
And so that fell through, but Mosrite was definitely the ones that, you know, came up with the red, white, and blue guitars, and Buck played them first. So then...
Oh, hold on a second.
Did I lose you? Are you still there?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
I'm not sure why my screen went blank when the call came in.
Oh,
so he kept having these attempts to reboot the company without much luck. And then starting in the late 70s, all these punk rock and new wave guitar players started playing Mosrite guitars. You know, Johnny Ramone from the Ramones, Ricky from the B-52s.
Yeah.
You know, there's a bunch of different ones. And then getting up a little bit further on, Kurt Cobain from Nirvana played a Mosrite. And so then all of a sudden there's this new rebirth of Mosrite guitars with all these punk rock and grunge guitar players who play them just because they think they look cool, you know, and they have a certain sound. Yeah. So by the time that Semi Mosley died in 1992, you know, he had made this incredible arc from, you know, Pentecostal church music to country music to
Nirvana,
rockabilly to surf music to, you know, and I should also mention that, you know, at the time that they went bankrupt in 1969, that the #1 album of the year was Inagata Davida by Iron Butterfly, and they're pictured playing two Mosrites on the cover, you know, so it was like they sort of went through like the acid rock phase, right? And then have all these like punk rock and grunge guys get into them. So it was really an interesting story, and it's never been documented. And I knew that it had to be done properly. And there's also like you might appreciate this. There's a whole angle to the Mosrite story. They became hugely popular in Japan because the Ventures were more popular than the Beatles in Japan.
Yeah.
You know, they played instrumental music, and they played a lot of songs in minor keys, like a lot of Japanese music is in minor keys. So they became huge stars, and Mosrite guitars became super popular in Japan. And in fact, there's still a couple of companies that are making Mosrite guitars over there now. They're not real or authentic Mosrites, but the name continues, and it's still a thing over there. So in addition to going and interviewing all of these people here in America for the book, like at some point this next year, I'm planning on taking a trip over to Japan with my friend Adam Tober, who speaks fluent Japanese.
Oh, wow.
And going and interviewing some of these older Japanese collectors and photographing guitars over there.
You know, when you're a kid and you first look at guitars, and I saw like the back, some picture of the B-52s, or Ricky's playing as Mosrite. It's blue, I think, the guitar, but he's only got like the top two strings and the bottom strings. And I'm all, is that how that guy gets that tone, or is it the guitar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I love the look of the guitar. It's like when you're a kid and you see that, you're like, I don't care what is it the sound? Is it the look of the guitar? And he had like grip tape or something like that, holding the strap together. And I thought like, yeah, that's what I want my guitar to look like, you know? And like,
right.
So like, I wonder, like, are new kids going to be coming out with these things? Are they going to want to play Mosrite guitars? And, like, are they going to become collector's items? Because obviously there's no more pure Mosrites anymore. It's like, how does someone get
They're
one of these
already
things?
collector's items for sure. I mean, I see people paying a lot of money for guitars that they're buying off the internet. And I always tell people with Mosrites that the production was pretty inconsistent. And, you know, if you get a guitar that was made by a teenage kid in Bakersfield at the factory on a Friday afternoon, it's not a great guitar. You really got to play them first. But,
Yeah.
you know, I will say this, if you find a guitar that Semi Mosley built himself and did the assembly and the setup and everything, that's a magic guitar. That is a guitar that virtually plays itself. And, you know, you can't determine that by buying it off of eBay or Reverb or something like
Yeah.
that. So I always tell people you gotta play them in person and don't spend a bunch of money for a guitar that you haven't played yet.
And the only way to know is by, like, playing it. It doesn't say, like, it doesn't have his name's etched in it in the body anywhere or anything, or.
I mean, some of the later ones, the ones made in the 80s, he would sign on the back, you know, in
Yeah.
the early 90s.
Yeah.
But I haven't bought a Mosrite guitar for a really long time, but I bought one a couple of months ago off of Facebook Marketplace. It looked interesting, and when I went down there, I was like, "Oh man, this is a freaking magic guitar! Like it literally plays itself." So I'm not leaving this one behind. I'm taking it home.